It's Thursday night, and I'm making the devotion for Friday. We have some activities tomorrow that we have to be involved in and probably won't have a chance. We're in the book of Exodus in chapter 20, the Ten Commandments. We've taken a look at our relationship to God as it relates to the first four commandments. And now we take a little closer look at the last six commandments and how we relate to those. Honor your father and mother. Now, I know there are some of you that probably have had experiences like mine where my mother left us when I was 12 and ran off with another man and didn't live a very godly life and certainly hurt the whole family. But the fact of the matter is, she's still my mother. Now she's gone to be with the Lord, but she was my mother, and I had to find in my heart to forgive her. Also had to respect the fact that she was my mother and the fact that she cared for me for a number of years. She gave birth to me. I think it's important for us to remember that honoring your father and mother, which is also called for in the New Testament in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, honoring your father and mother involves forgiveness, thankfulness, and respect. You may not think they deserve those things, but God says that they do, and therefore we have to honor our fathers and mothers. And if you hold bitterness in your heart towards your fathers or your mothers, that's only going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt them. The next one is murder. Thou shalt not kill is not the same thing as murder, because many have argued against capital punishment because they take it to be not killing. Certainly, God never intended for us to kill on our own merit. That is, to take matters into our own hands and be the judge and jury of someone that we feel is guilty of something and to murder them, or to allow our anger to run out of control and to murder someone. It's very, very important that we realize that many times these commandments are based around the three types of temptation that there are in the world: the pride of life, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes. Certainly the pride of life and the lust of the flesh come into place with not murdering somebody, and God even provided cities of refuge for those that were guilty of, or at least were expected to be guilty of, some kind of a crime so that they could get a fair trial. And murder is taking things into our own hands, taking one's life, and there's nothing that God holds much higher in all of the humanity that we have than the value of life. It's really hard to imagine how people have justified the killing of babies that have taken full term and not called it murder. But nevertheless, let's move on to adultery. That's a lust of the flesh. That, as Jesus had put spirit to it, said that's even lusting after a woman. It breaks God's commandment for a union between a man and a woman, and tells us very clearly in the scriptures that it's only because of the hardness of the heart that God allows divorce. It was never his intention for the marriage vows to be broken through adultery. And yet he realizes that many times when a marriage is broken through adultery, that it's because there's just not the capacity to forgive that breaking of that union and the vows that were made at the altar. But it's not God's will. And it's certainly not God's will for us to enter into adulterous relationship. Adulterous relationship means not only breaking our marriage union, but somebody else's marriage union. And fornication, of course, being involved in the fleshly sin, and God certainly calls that sin as well. So we need to understand God says, thou shalt not commit adultery. He also says, thou shalt not steal. And stealing begins with coveting. That is, that we see something that we want, even though it's not ours. We have a lust of the flesh for it, and then we take it, where the mental sin of wanting it through coveting becomes an action, and we actually steal it. And remember, I mentioned to you in the last devotion, or the last two devotions, that when we steal, it doesn't have to be big things. It can be little things. Anything that doesn't belong to us is stealing. And God says that we violate somebody else's trust when we steal something. We've harmed somebody else. We've taken away a privilege that they had by taking it from them. And God says that's not a good thing. And then comes bearing false witness. This is intentional lies. This isn't thinking you saw somebody and then mistaking identity. This is intentionally lying or bearing a false witness and telling a story that's not true. That's what some people did at Jesus' trial when they misrepresented what he said and what he did and what they saw and what they didn't see. It usually comes out of the pride of life. Intentional lies usually have a hidden motive of trying to want to get ahead ourselves, putting somebody else down to make them look bad. False witness is a terrible thing, and we should avoid it at all costs because it's one of God's 10 commandments. Finally, coveting is the envy or lustful eye that sees something else that belongs to somebody else, and instead of thinking that we'd like to have a house like that, a wife like that, servants like that, or possessions like that. We want those houses, those wives, those servants, those possessions, and it comes from envy, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life, and God says it's wrong. Now realize that all of these are commandments that deal with our relationship with others, because there are none of these things that we can do that do not only affect our lives, but they affect the lives of other people. They transgress other people's rights, they transgress other people's provisions, and they transgress other people's feelings and emotions. Think about the consequences of dishonoring father and mother. Think about the consequences of murder and of adultery and of stealing and of false witness, that somebody might go to jail for years because of your testimony, and of coveting and desiring and having this burning desire to have somebody else's property, somebody else's possessions, somebody else's mate. These are very, very unhealthy things, not only for us, but for the other people as well. So let me come back to these again and say to you that God didn't lay these down so that we could fail again and again in breaking these commandments. He didn't set these down to deprive us any joy or any pleasure. He set these down because he knew these were good for us. We say in the scriptures very clearly, we want people to do unto us as we would do unto them. We would not want somebody to murder our family member or ourselves. We would not want somebody to commit adultery with our mates. We would not want somebody to steal from us. We would not want somebody to lie about us and bear false witness. We would not like somebody to covet to the place that they want to take away things that we have. We don't want to have disrespect to ourselves as an honoring father and mother. So we see very clearly that these things were laid down for us, that we might have life, that we might have it abundantly. We find that these commandments were given to us because in doing them or not doing them, we find the life that God really wants us to have. And we don't infringe on anybody else's rights. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.